We have individuals going to the scene, looks like possibly picking up bodies and weapons.
Let me engage.
Hey, we need to stop that so we can get down there. We can shoot. You see my location?
Roger. Break. Crazy Horse 1-8. Request permission to engage individual.
I'm picking up the wounded. Yeah, we're trying to get permission to engage. Come on, let us shoot.
A Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 1-8.
We're taking him.
Bushmaster, Crazy Horse 1-8.
It's Bushmaster 7, go ahead.
Roger, we have a black SUV or bongo truck picking up the bodies. Request permission to engage.
Bushmaster 7, Roger. This is Bushmaster 7, Roger, engage.
1-8, engage. Clear.
Come on. Oh yeah, look at that, right through the windshield.
Over the years, WikiLeaks has published and revealed gruesome instances of war crimes, enforced disappearances, torture, corruption, abductions, and scores of different forms of human rights violations. Julian Assange did what investigative journalists routinely do. He elicited confidential information from a source and published it. Sadly, instead of prosecuting the perpetrators of the crimes so disclosed, the United States decided to prosecute the whistleblower and the publisher. Instead of convicting war criminals, they convicted the whistleblower and the journalist. We must address this injustice and learn from it so that it may never happen again.
Hi, everyone. We had a little email mix-up, so if you're watching this and you're one of our regulars, I did put it in the Twitter messages, so please come on in. But we're very happy to have Kimon back here, and so we'll get right into it. I wanted to talk about political violence. This article was sent to me, and it was in the New York Times, and it's been reprinted in several papers around the country. And I think that it was really interesting because it's sort of like, how do we define what political violence is? And, you know, in this article, he is talking about, concerns about around the election. And we covered a little bit of this when Lulu Freistap from Smart Elections was on, that, the term election denier and is you hear this a lot now, and there are there have been election officials that have been threatened. And I sort of went down a little rabbit hole after reading this article, and I looked up some of the cases that were reported to the Justice Department, and they were about threats. And my first thought was kind of like we covered last week when Bo Forte was on, and I thought, are these really, legitimate threats? And actually most of them were pretty serious. So I would say that we have to remember that when we're protesting or complaining to officials, to be really careful in the language that we use. But let's see, we have Kimon here, so let's jump right in and let him, you want to introduce yourself again, and where you're running and everything, and any of your thoughts on this, like just how we define political violence.
Yes, I'm so glad to be a part of the discussion again, and thank you for having me back. I'm sorry I'm off camera. I'm in the car from the studio to my next destination. This is Kimon Freeman representing Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. I'm running for D.C. delegate. We say that because we don't have a vote in Congress, but it's a congressional seat, non-voting congressional seat, because D.C. is not a state, and whereas taxation without representation. And 50% of our tax dollars are going to the very things that we just saw, which was unrestricted violence, political violence. People call it war, people call it terrorism, but it's political violence, and we're paying for it. And not only in Israel, but with 800 military installations around the world. And it's so great to be accused of being a journalist when the bar is set so high by a great man like Julian Assange, who was persecuted, was a political prisoner for simply doing his job and telling the truth. And I love the way that piece was ended, because none of the war criminals have gone to jail. None of the war criminals have been charged, but they sought to go after the whistleblower and the journalist. So having said that, it really pains me that we have a VP who is running around applauding the fact that the war criminal Dick Cheney is endorsing her, and that should be something that warrants more support for her. And that is one of the reasons why I don't support her, is because of that. I'm very impressed with her VP selection. So I was going to be one of those people that held their noses for her. But when we saw that they didn't allow a Palestinian to speak at the DNC, and you've seen the war crimes going on there, and make no mistake, America is funding all of that. All of that is American-made political warfare and profiting from. That's the only thing I think is missing from this conversation. But there is military-industrial complexes making money. This is the last speech from President Eisenhower, and he warned us about it. He was not no olive branch, namaste, he was not a peaceful man, but he did make a great speech on his way out the office. And I think that's what we have here today. And until we wrestle with the fact that we have a war machine, and we have a war economy, and the president is the commander in chief of that war economy, we're not going to get any peace around the world, because peace doesn't make money. No one can profit from peace. And that is why we still have the problems we have now. No one makes money from medical cures. That's why we have the most expensive medical system in the world, and provides no free care to each other, for the citizens, rather. So it's a lot to say, because I'm personally affected by this. Both my fathers were in wars. I'm privy to war stories. My stepfather got shot in the face in Vietnam. My biological father had racist white people in his own unit firing at him when they got opportunity in crossfire situations. So it's war is hell. And until we acknowledge our part in it and our complicitness in it, it will continue. And I'm proud to say that I'm running as a peace candidate. I'm proud to say that I have been a war tax resistor for 25 years. I'm proud to say that I'm against all acts of aggression. I denounce all wars that America has instigated. And here's something unpopular for a lot of people. Putin has not done anything that America hasn't already, or other participants.
Yeah. Well, it is hard to, it is hard to, hear all this talk about domestic violence, when we're doing all these things overseas. And I've got this great Meltzer clip, always Meltzer, but he talks about this. This was right after, George Floyd was killed. So he ties it together with, all of our foreign policy.
The police have basically lost any sense of duty to serve the community. Instead, they perceive the population as an enemy. Here's why, in my view. In the last decades, particularly since 9/11, we can witness an increasing militarization of the police, not only in the US, but throughout the world. We have blurred the distinction between war and peace. We are in a constant war against terror, both abroad and at home. Police are increasingly trained and equipped in the same way as military forces, and they even dress like military officers. So it is no surprise that they develop the same attitudes that are similar to military forces, that operate in hostile environments of war. So everyone could be a terrorist. Every citizen is a potential enemy. So with this attitude, we no longer strive to serve and help and protect the community, but we believe that we have to fight and control and subjugate the community. We simply cannot tolerate military forces committing war crimes abroad such as those that are shown in the infamous collateral murder video, another infamous video, or you cannot have the CIA kidnap and torture countless people around the world as a matter of policy and not prosecute any of these atrocious crimes and grant impunity to criminals in uniform, basically, and then expect your law enforcement officers at home to abide by the law and treat your own citizens with respect and dignity. It just doesn't work like that. If a government grants impunity to its officials when they torture and rape and murder abroad, these crimes will eventually come back to haunt you at home. And we have seen that in the George Floyd case. It can become a veritable nightmare for your own population. Because just as Derek Chauvin is not just an exception and a bad apple in the police force, so do Abu Ghraib torture and the collateral murder massacre were not exceptional events either.
Oh, did we lose Kimon?
I think we did.
Oh, because I was all set to tee him up with a Veterans for Peace quote that goes along with what he was saying, and then what that Meltzer clip was. What Nils Meltzer was saying is this idea that our wars overseas are mirrors of our wars here at home.
Well, and the funding too. I should have had a graph or something of some of Stephen Semler's great work, where he has covered that, like how much we're militarizing our police forces here, and that money is going. And I believe, I'm going to get this wrong, but I think the Biden administration has spent more than any before on that.
On the military, absolutely, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that's why we have tanks, and, Michael Harbaugh, who was just texting, I invited him to come, but he was describing a protest, I believe it was in Ohio, where it was just very militarized, all the police are in gear. Is it really necessary, Well,
I remember, I remember being, when I was in the Marines, I was stationed in Okinawa, and then 9/11 happened, and then by the time I got back here, I remember going to the Marine Corps Marathon. And one of my first big public events back in the U.S. after coming back, from being in Asia, and I remember almost stopping in mid-step because I saw this police officer who was kitted out with his rifle, with his body armor, looking like he was in a war zone. So here comes Kimon.
Okay.
Yeah, I lost connection there. Sorry about that.
Okay, we got you back, though. We got you back. Yeah, thanks, Kimon, for being with us. I don't know how much you saw that Nils Meltzer's clip, but I think
I caught the gist of it.
I'm sorry?
I caught the gist of it, yes.
Yeah, right. So this idea, I'm a member of Veterans for Peace, and one of the things we say is that our wars overseas are mirrors of our wars here at home. And, as you're running your candidacy, as you're running this campaign to be a delegate, how are you seeing your community affected by, the topic was to be political violence, but certainly violence can come in many forms, right? How does that type of political violence affect the community you want to represent?
Well, unfortunately, I live in a nation's capital where everyone in some shape, form, or fashion works for the federal government. And because of that, they have their views are formed by the administration that they try to fall in line. They don't want to bite the hands that feed them. So quietly, they may have some criticisms of domestic policy and foreign policy and what have you, but they keep those policies to themselves because so many people have told me to be quiet about Palestine. So many people have told me not to speak out about the war, and that they could support me if I would only just avoid talking about those things. And I'm sorry, I'm not a consensus candidate, as I tell them. I'm quoting Martin Luther King. I have to speak truth to power at all times, and that's where we differ in ways. So unfortunately, I think DC has the largest population of bougie people in America because of their politics are formulated by their employers. But having said that, I think all of this is changing. I think that America has been exposed. I don't think the argument of them spreading democracy or protecting their borders or the freedom of other people is selling anymore. I think it's raw. I think it's been exposed. I think that veil has been lifted, and I think we are now wrestling with the ugly reality of what we're seeing, which is war for profit. And I don't think that is sustainable. I think we are again at an inflection point. And in the words of Cornel West, we're looking at one leader, the Biden administration, or by Ms. Harris, the Biden administration extended, taking us to World War III, or a fascist Donald Trump, a racist and fascist Donald Trump, taking us to a civil war here domestically. So those choices are not good. But I think that if we had to choose, we should go with cleaning house rather than destroying the planet.
Right, and I'll reply to your Cornel West quote with another Cornel West quote that we live at the intersection of might makes right and greed is good.
There we have it.
Yeah.
And this idea that this is why I'm so appreciative of what you and other candidates are doing outside of the two-party system, because it's not just about cleaning house or clearing house. It's about building. It's about, you can clear it out, you can clean it out, you can tear it down, but then the idea is to rebuild it, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and the uncommitted movement, I wish I could say I was surprised at what happened with that, but you just realize, like, my God, if like a genocide is not enough to have people say enough, we're not supporting you. I don't know what is. So I have this other clip. I don't want to take up the time. If you only have a couple minutes, though, Kimon, I'd rather hear you talk more about what you're doing there. And well, I guess I'll ask you a question. Do you feel like people are falling in line? You said, I know where you live is DC, and it's very any blue will do, I guess. But do you feel like, especially among young people, that's changed?
Yes, I think the young people are definitely changing it. The median age in Washington, D.C. is 35. And so, unfortunately, the people that's in power are the gainfully employed parents of these young people. But the future looks bright if we can prevent them from becoming their parents. And so the other flip side of the coin is that by being the nation's capital, everyone comes here to march, protest, and rally and be heard. And so we see on a regular basis a litmus test of the resistance that is building in this country. So it's nothing unheard of for us to see, 50,000 people protesting something in the nation's capital. And one way people can argue that it desensitizes us and doesn't, but on the other hand, it also empowers people and inspires people and informs people, particularly when they're hearing and seeing information that's contrary to the mainstream media. And I think that when we see a unicorn like Ta-Nehisi Coates breaking through with his work, when you see Dr. Jill Stein and her VP Butch Ware on a popular morning show called The Breakfast Club, exposing Democratic attack dog operatives for what they are, I think that means that we are truly at an inflection point, and the winds of change are behind our back as opposed to maintaining the status quo. I think that we are living in interesting times and dangerous times, perhaps even, but it's also a time where we also can see that there's definitely some light coming through at the end of this dark tunnel that we're on.
Yeah, I watched that interview, the Breakfast Club interview, and I don't know the other woman's name, if she was a regular, but she was really giving them hell, and the comments in YouTube were all overwhelmingly for.
Wasn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
It was. It's like, wow, even with all the censorship, I mean, that really tells you something,
Right. And the fact
her name was Angela Rye. She's a famous. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say the fact that Democrats are running an attack ad against Jill and Butch. I mean, I think that's the first time a party's ever run an attack ad against a third party. So, to your point.
Yeah, they wouldn't do it if it wasn't a threat.
Right.
Right.
In fact, I got to say this again. I think that we are at the precipice of seeing the largest third-party voter turnout in the history of America. And the threshold is to get 5% so that they can then garner federal funding, federal financing, and gain interest to the next debate.
Right, right. And, that's a lot of what we've tried to do here. And, by focusing on, civil liberties issues that sort of stem from the Assange case, we showed how much overlap there is in things that Greens and Libertarians and Independents Alliance Party, all these other parties actually agree on. And they're fighting hard to actually try to represent the people.
Yes, yeah.
It's definitely an uphill battle, though. I think the narrative around, that they can't win is just so ingrained, or that you're throwing your vote away. But I have also heard a lot more and read a lot more on Twitter or TikTok, other places, that people are saying, enough with that. Like, you're assuming I would vote for a Democrat when I would probably just not vote if that was my only option. So I'm hearing a lot more of that lately, which is encouraging. But so I wanted to, Kimon, do you want to, or can you stick around for another clip, or do you need to go? I'll set this up. I don't know if you can hear. We might have lost him again.
Yeah.
So we have such a small panel, which is my error tonight. Somehow my email, I don't know what happened. I sent it in the Twitter messages, which is different than I normally do. So
things happen. Things happen.
Anyway, so the article, the New York Times article that I just showed you, was written by a man named Robert Pape.
Yeah, I know Bob Pape. I worked with him a number of years ago.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's interesting. I didn't make clips of it, but I found some footage of him on C-SPAN that was a lot more, I guess, flattering than this clip I'm about to play. But I was really just I listened to these two quite long panels with him on it. And I was, what his analysis was, it wasn't that it was incorrect. I just felt like it was, as someone in the comments and the question said, that he's being a bit reductionist to blame all of the civil unrest and what he calls violent populism on race alone. And I mean, that's certainly a factor. And unfortunately, we lost Kimon, because I'm sure he could add more to it. But on this particular thing, though, I think he's really just not looking at the bigger picture. So I didn't want to take anything out of context, but I think this is pretty clear. It's just a minute and a half. And then I've got a clip of Laurel Krauss to sort of, you'll see.
I think what's really happening is this era of violent populism is creating a situation where the leaders in the United States, they are leaders now of domestic groups, not just interest groups, but the groups that put them in office, the big groups, and they look at the international as, will that help them? And one little point on this, Mark, sorry to go on, but Mayor Brandon Johnson in Chicago, this is Chicago now. Okay. Just a few months ago, he forced through a decision in the Chicago City Council on support to end genocide in Gaza. Now, just think about that for a moment. Okay. There's no influence the city council in Chicago could possibly have on Netanyahu or the Palestinians. It's just not possible. And Netanyahu doesn't even bother to respond to this. Why is this happening? And it went on for a month, and it's still going on in the Chicago Tribune as of yesterday. This is going on because the local leader is seeing this as these international dimensions as connected to their domestic support. And that is another part of what is occurring here. This is a breakdown of realism that's occurring.
Yeah, I mean, local politicians have always made resolutions about all kinds of things, right? They've always announced, today, today's a day to celebrate people with cats, you know, or what have you. I mean, there's always that type of so what occurred in Chicago, which occurred across the country, that's nothing unique or different. You know, we had it here in you know, we had it all here throughout North Carolina, trying
Right.
to get resolutions through, and you know, it's no different than when the city council or county commissioners, whoever, pass a resolution denouncing X or honoring Y or remembering Z. You know, I mean, they do these types of things all the time, and it's meant to be seen as a signal to higher level political leaders about the realities of their constituencies. So I kind of, yeah, I kind of disagree with Dr. Pape there.
Well, yeah, I guess you'd
Where
have
he's
to
going with that. Yeah. Yeah.
maybe watch the whole larger section there, but it really it kind of shocked me because I felt like he was kind of saying like, why does anybody really like care about that, or that
Yeah.
the politician was just saying it because it was popular. And I think there throughout the whole thing there's just this, like I said, just this reducing the you know, the student protests and the other civil unrest. The whole entire thing is attributed to race, and that it's changing, and by 2040, you know, whites will be in the minority. And I mean, we know there's certainly that there are white nationalist groups that believe, you know, that that's a concern for them. I've seen that, but I think it was really tone deaf on Gaza and the student protests for that. And it's if you listen to the whole thing, it's almost like you're getting a little window into what the empire thinks about all this civil unrest, that it's really, unfortunately, so distracting for them. It's making it difficult to, you know,
Right.
continue
Well,
the empire.
I mean, because they're going with what's happening. This support for Israel is cutting across both the public opinion, you know, both public opinion in the U.S. as well as the reality of what we're seeing, you know, on our screens.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this, just the, you know, and that public opinion, of course, is informed by the reality we're seeing on our screens. So yeah, I mean, it really is the problems they are creating for themselves, the powers that be, if you will, by not just going against public opinion, but claiming that what the public is seeing is not real. You know,
Right.
right? I mean, claiming that the sky is red, if you
Mhm.
will, when it's blue. You know, I mean, so it
And
is. It's real, and then this idea that the student protests are violent and that they're funded by Iran and that they
mhm.
don't represent the public, the public's view on this. Again, is just another dissonant statement that further drives the public away from the political leaders, because again, they say these people are just, what am I taking, crazy pills? These people are, just so far removed from what's actually happening.
Right. And if Kamon was still here, I was going to ask him if, you know, he's seen a lot of these protests in DC, what percentage of them are actually violent, because
Right.
we've heard, you know, Bo reported back that there really wasn't that. We don't know what percentage of people there might be instigators, but I mean, certainly there is going to be that in any kind of a very large protest like that. But that's why it's so important for people to protest peacefully, because as pissed off as people are, it hurts your cause if that does happen. But I think the other problem I had with what he was saying was that I almost felt like he was trying to say, like, he said Netanyahu is not going to listen to this, and like that's not effective when we know we had Ann Batiza got this ceasefire resolution in, I forget which part of Wisconsin that was, Milwaukee, I think.
Yeah.
And Phil Anderson, who's a regular in here, was, I think, was part of that or attended that meeting and stuff. So and they have been successful. So this sort of attitude of like, we just need to control this violence really bothered me. But so this is Laurel, speaking of someone who knows about violence and
Right.
the definitions also, actually, let me pull this up from it's Wikipedia, but it's from various places. And then I'll play Laurel's clip. References different places. Hold on. But like, what exactly is political violence? And it's literally it's just any violence perpetuated in order to achieve political goals. But it can be used by state against other states, which is war, and it can be the government on non-state actors, its own civilians, as in the case of Kent State, the National Guard being called to a student protest, which I think we're in real danger of those kinds of things happening. It wasn't Mike Johnson, didn't he called for that? I forget which protest that was.
I think there were many members of Congress who called for more.
It was bipartisan.
Yeah,
Right.
But then also if you remember, you go back, excuse me, a few years to summer of 2020, you had Senator Tom Cotton, essentially writing in the New York Times that the National Guard should be used to police the Black Lives Matters protests. And I forget how he phrased it, but it wasn't in a very violent manner that he phrased it.
Right. As they continue voting for and funding for wars, and yet they make this big thing about like, oh no, the people are upset because they're not being represented, and so they're protesting. But anyway, this is Laurel, and I thought this was great at her town meeting.
Good evening, dear neighbors. My name is Laurel Krause. For 20 years, I've made my home on the Allison Center for Peace. This evening, I'm here to encourage the Fort Bragg City Council to consider and support the sustained ceasefire proclamation we'll be putting before you. Our proclamation is made in response to Israel's unrelenting bombing and killing of women and children in Gaza and their inhumane genocide of the people of Palestine. Since October 20th, 2023, every Friday in town center at noon, I join a group of local citizens to protest for peace and ceasefire, sponsored by the Allison Center for Peace. As a Jew, I support this proclamation and demanded a sustained permanent ceasefire now. The Allison Center for Peace was established in memory of my sister Allison Krause, who was one of 4 anti-war students, protesters killed by U.S. military gunfire at Kent State on May 4, 1970. The Allison Center is creating a Kent State and Jackson State massacre memorial where we honor those who stood against war and for peace in May 1970. Populated with sustainable art, the memorial is a developing project to enhance peace and healing via peace gardens and a power art farm, a place for us to get on with our peace. Our proclamation calls for the protection of all people's human rights, free of terror and bombing, with access to food, water, shelter, and medical aid. We call for peace in Gaza, urging the Fort Bragg City Council to adopt the ceasefire proclamation we are going to be putting before you. Join the 47 cities presently passing symbolic resolutions calling for a halt to Israel's Gaza bombardment. Stand with other U.S. cities like Richmond, San Francisco, Oakland, Detroit, Michigan, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Chicago, Illinois, Atlanta, Georgia, Akron, Ohio, St. Louis, Missouri, Albany, New York, Wilmington, Delaware, Bridgeport, Connecticut, and Madison, Wisconsin, to name a few. Those quiet about genocide are accomplices. Let the voice of peace be heard. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think anyone that says that people speaking up about it isn't making a difference, it is. Unfortunately, not enough to make it stop. But I mean, what else can we do? We have to keep fighting.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, the alternative is just to let it occur without raising a voice, without taking a stand, without doing something. And I mean, you hear this from people with family in Palestine, whether it's the West Bank or East Jerusalem or Gaza, and it does make a difference to them that people here are standing in solidarity with them. It does make a difference to them that people here are protesting on their behalf. They they don't expect miracles, they don't expect the change, but just means that they know people are with them. And if that's the only reason we do it, then that in and of itself is a perfectly sound and fine reason.
And I've heard even, well, a lot of people, I guess, on the liberal side will say that Trump's going to be worse. I don't know how you can be worse, but it does seem that he will probably continue it, given the money given to him by Adelson's wife. But I was really encouraged. I happened upon a TikTok space panel the other day, and it was actually all conservatives, and a lot of them were ex-military, but they were very upset about being called pro-Hamas when they were just against the genocide in Gaza. And it was just something I hadn't really heard, because I don't really know how that side sees things, but it was really encouraging. So I don't know if they're holding their nose and voting Republican this time or what, but maybe, again, maybe we'll have more vote. Maybe they vote for Chase Oliver,
Yeah, I mean, or don't vote at all. I think that's
Right.
it. I mean, that's I think one of the issues we have as people who want to see third parties and independents prosper is that Americans, when they protest vote, that protest vote is by not going to the polls.
Right.
Yeah. Very few Americans who are upset with the system say, you know what, I'm going to go to the election booth and see if there's anybody there worth voting for. They just don't go. And that's one of the problems, right, on another level then with the third party and independent candidates is getting the word out. So if you have people who are disaffected, who don't want to vote for Republicans or Democrats, they just assume there's no one else on the ballot. So why would I go? I might go just to look and see if there's someone, who doesn't have a D or R next to their name. So yeah, I mean, that's a real issue in terms of building support at the ballot box for these non-duopoly candidates.
Yeah.
Is that, the way Americans protest vote is by not voting.
Well, hopefully we can change that. I mean, like you said, with Jill having an ad against her, I mean, I think there's more support maybe than there ever has been before, like Kimon said. But I do think, and since we have a minute, I think I'll show you this clip. It's actually on Twitter, so give me just a second. Speaking about violence around the upcoming election that could happen. One second. All right, this one instead. So as you know, I do some volunteer work with election organizations. They happen to actually be run by Democrats. You met Lulu recently. They really, Lulu's great. Yeah. And also Audit USA, John Brakey as well, really tries very hard to be nonpartisan. I've had some heated discussions with him a few times because he is a Democrat. But this is really like shocking what happened to him. He lives in Arizona, and so he was there and part of the what they called the fraudit, the whole fiasco after 2020. But okay, let me pull this here. This segment actually there it goes. Was played on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver with a couple of years ago when it happened. And then it was basically recirculated just recently, I think maybe Friday. And so he's been in touch with them because the way this got retweeted by Keith Olbermann, what they did was they cut his clip. And so you don't hear everything that he says, and it completely misrepresents, what he stands for. But I think, even here, Keith Olbermann's language here. Do you see this?
I can read that. Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty bad. Yeah. And you think, well, that could be inciting violence. And one thing that Robert Pape said was that the acceptance of violent alternatives is like really both both parties, people of both parties are more forgiving of it and accepting of it, which is kind of scary.
Yeah.
But
Well, when so much of your politics is hate based, right? When 40% of Democrats and 40% of Republicans hate one another, when the idea of redemptive violence or righteous violence is institutionalized in our culture, not just in entertainment, but in the founding histories and myths of this country, right? We fought for our freedom. We fought to free the slaves. We fought to keep the world safe for democracy. I mean, all of that certainly rolls into this idea that violence is necessary to whatever, keep our freedoms, protect ourselves, protect our rights, and so forth. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, well, here, let me play, I'll play this clip for you. This is part one, and then you'll see, I'll play part two. Let's see, hopefully it's, oh, whoops. Ah. I don't know what's going on with my sound here.
Huh. But I can kind of read the post or the tweet below the video, and this is something that's also very disturbing, is that as you said, this video is taken out of context. The way it's clipped and so forth, it's misleading. And
Yeah, is it too hard to hear, Matt?
Yeah, I can't hear it at all. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Well,
but the post below, it says, it says, to Oberman, this guy isn't pushing that theory. He's only trying to explain what they're saying, and you're attacking him. And then someone like Oberman doesn't correct himself as well.
Right.
You have that issue as well, too, where once the lie gets out there, it's never retracted. It isn't even attempted to be retracted because it's this mindset of everything's zero sum. Everything is us versus them. And that further fuels this combative nature and the need for violence, because the only thing that these people will respond to is force. There's no reasoning with them, right? I mean, so yeah, it's just this what we have in our society right now. Yeah, it's very easy for people to react in a way that they think is the necessary means to achieve their ends. The other side of it too, though, in terms of political violence, Kelly, I think about this a lot, particularly when I watch someone like Matt Miller at the State Department or John Kirby at the National Security Council, is when you're dealing with people who just won't listen and who just lie to you and lie and lie and lie. At what point do people say the only alternative is force? The only alternative is violence. There is no reasoning with these people. These people cannot be, there's nothing civil that can be done with them, because they will not respond. They're so smug and secure in their power that only being forcibly pulled from their power is the option to us. And so you can see how that type of need for political violence, as well as people would see it, can really come to pass.
Right, but it's like maybe they're doing that to instigate it. Like I remember when was it Blinken that was playing at a bar, and he's playing guitar, and he's playing Rockin' in the Free World. It's like they're openly mocking the people. I don't know, and then so if people do get violent, then they just bring the militarized police down on them. So I think that's why, this is an argument that I hear a lot in the activist community. Is like there are people that they don't vote and they're very much against it. Misty, who joined us, she was great on the panel, but she just doesn't believe in voting. She doesn't believe that can be, that's an avenue that can be bring change. But I think we have to fight on both fronts. Yes. But, I think that the thing that bothered me the most maybe about this New York Times article was it was a lot about the upcoming election, but there wasn't any let's get to the root of the problem here. We need some transparency with these elections, because maybe these, they call them election deniers, are wrong to say that an election was stolen. But as Benny Smith says, who was part of Smart Elections with Lulu, someone asked him, "Do you believe the election was accurate or not in 2020?" And he just said, "It doesn't matter what I believe. The fact of the matter is, it's black box voting. We have no way to really accurately, verify." So that's really what John is trying to do, and he's come up with this new program now where you can get, and I'll share that at some point, but you can get the ballot images if they save the ballot images. They don't always. They're supposed to by law, but you can compare them with the cast vote record, which is available to the public. Now, you do have boards of elections will resist if people put in public records requests for these things. A lot of times they're not forthcoming with it, but it is by law something that you're supposed to be able to get. But yeah, back to that clip though, and sorry you couldn't hear that. I should have made a separate clip. But the second part where John, he basically just says, "No, I don't believe any of that." He was relaying what the certain people at that Arizona audit were saying about the paper was bamboo and fake ballots and flown in, and he was just telling what was going on the floor there in that arena where they were trying to do an audit. But yeah, they just cut that out, and so he's been he really takes it well. He's been dragged through the mud on Comedy Central, but anyway.
Yeah.
So, but back to the debate stuff too, among, the like you said, zero-sum game. I think I was watching part of the Texas Senate debate. It was Ted Cruz and was it Colin Allred? And we had the better Ted on our panel.
Right, we did. Yep.
Liberty Ted. Yeah. But, I listened to a few minutes of it, and it was just constant, they're talking about these really hot button issues throughout the whole debate, just like the presidential debate. And it was just arguing. And I thought, I think we should, applaud, pat ourselves on the back and applaud all the great candidates that we've had on since January, because we've had few, I can't even think I don't think we've had any real total argument, have we?
No, we haven't. We've had, everything has always been civil. There's been people who've disagreed with one another, but it's always been done in a mature and civil manner. We've never had to tell anyone to stop or to be quiet. You've never had to mute anyone's microphones. Yeah, I mean, which unfortunately is not what most media wants these days, though, or at least the corporate media. They want a team red versus team blue, battle, and that's the nature of media. They think that's the way they generate ratings, and that's their revenue. But it's also how they establish their base, how they establish their loyal viewers. Providing them that type of identity politics of us versus them. And you tune in to watch your side battle the other side.
Yeah. I think though a lot of people are sick of it. Maybe some people like it, but I mean, we know that more and more people are just turning off the television.
Right.
So, and let's see, let me pull this. Well, I guess I'm sorry that I didn't get the email out to everyone, but anyway, next week we've got John Rachel coming on talking about his book, War is Making Us Poor, which you wrote a foreword to?
Right. Myself and Bill Astoria wrote one as well. Yeah.
Okay, great. And, John has been at this for many years. He was actually part of when I really started any of my political activism, journalism work, because he had started Contract for American Renewal and had already had a lot of candidates, I don't know, 60, I think, around there, sign on to that. It was more, I would say it was more leftist, not just civil liberties. It probably wouldn't appeal to a lot of libertarians, but it was, anyway, I learned a lot from him. So I look forward to having him on. And I'll also say that this weekend, Orson Mazel is hosting. Here, I'll just show this real. Oh, hold on. I have to share it in a different place. He is doing a live stream, or I'm running this live stream on Sunday at 4 o'clock. Let's see if I can get this here. I may not be able to pull it up, but it's Lawrence Lessig and Sam Husseini is going to come on and talk about Vote Pact, which he did here. Yeah, I think I can't pull it up here. Oh, wait a second. Nope. Sorry, I can't pull this up here. Anyway, it's called A Time to Break Silence. David Rovix, who we've played that song many times, the Kill the Messenger, he's performing. Another guy, Shaheen, I forget his last name, but so great music. And then someone from Represent Us and someone from Upvote Virginia and Equal Vote. So they're all going to be talking about ranked choice voting and some other things I've never heard of, something called star voting. I have heard of approval voting.
Yep. There's a few different types of alternative voting systems out there, and they all have their pros and cons, as you'd expect.
Yeah. So anyway, that's Sunday at 4. So if you're interested in that, I guess contact me. I can send you the link. It's actually a webinar. It'll probably be up on their website. It's a Castleton Festival later, but it's a private event you have to sign up for it. But Orson is a really great guy. His father was a famous composer, Lorin Maazel, and he actually did an opera of 1984.
Oh,
which is really amazing. But okay, well, I guess we're at like 3 minutes. We'll go ahead and sign off, and we'll make sure everybody gets the link next time. So with John Rachel on next Thursday at 9.
Great. Okay. And
then we're still, we have one last thing. We still are, I have, believe we have October 29th that Chase Oliver has said that his campaign said he's available. We're just waiting to see if Jill Stein can fit us in to have a great conversation between the two of them on all of these issues, First and Fourth Amendment issues that Greens and Libertarians agree on. So we really hope that happens. So October 29th, or maybe another date before the election. So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Thank you, everybody.